location where things are quarantined and locked down. And tell us what you're hoping to get out of today's session. We're really curious to hear what you're hoping to learn about the Allen Academy and about our ACIP program. So go ahead and do that. Now, quick tip with the chat panel. You'll notice there's a drop down at the bottom of the chat panel, and it gives you the options of saying, sending your message to either all panelists or all panelists and attendees. If you want everyone in the channel to see your message, then you want to make sure to set that to all panelists and attendees. So Dr. Handy, hopefully I'm pronouncing your name correctly, but there we go. Yep. All right. So we've got a message up there. That's how you do it. If you want to send your message to everybody, that's how you do it. You make sure that you select all panelists and attendees from the chat drop down. So John, you sent your message to all panelists, which is fine. If you want your message to be a little more private and only send it to me, Ethan, and the other folks who are panelists on today's webinar, you can do that. If you do want your message to be seen by everyone, select all panelists and attendees. So again, welcome. My name is Ellen Burns-Johnson. I'm your kind of host for today. I'll be kicking us off and kind of introducing the platform and introducing Ethan as we get started. And we'll be joined in a few minutes by Ethan, as well as guest star Dr. Michael Allen himself, who will be jumping in a little bit to talk about the Allen Academy today. So welcome as you're getting started, as you're joining. Go ahead and check out the chat panel. If you are seeing the slide, I'm just going to look to see in chat whether you're able to see the slide that says use the chat panel. You guys seeing the slide okay? All right, great. Okay, perfect. So as you're coming in and as you're kind of getting started, probably refreshing your coffee and getting seated, go ahead and tell us who you are, introduce yourself in the chat panel, tell us where you're from, and feel free to type in chat a little bit about what you're hoping to get out of today's session. We will have Q&A later on in the session, but this is a great way to get some of your questions up and out front. So welcome, everybody. It's the top of the hour now. We'll give everyone a couple minutes to filter in, and then we'll go ahead and get started. So as for me, I'll go ahead and type in chat as well. I'm Ellen. I'm from the Twin Cities in Minnesota, in the USA. And it is once again cloudy here. That's my lament. The weather was beautiful yesterday. It's finally spring. The birds are singing, and now it's cloudy again. So don't know if it matters too much spending a lot of time inside. Hi, Dennis. Dennis is typing in, introducing himself, working as a training specialist for Health and Human Services. Great. I wonder, Dennis, if you're particularly busy right now. Hello, Jim. Jim, just to give you a heads up, you sent your message to all panelists, which means your other attendees aren't able to see your message, which is fine. Just make sure to double check on your chat dropdown that you're sending your message to the right group. If you send it to all panelists, it's only going to come to me and Ethan and a few others. If you send it to all panelists and attendees, it'll go to everyone in the chat channel. Great. Okay, Jim, you got it. I see. Perfect. Hello, everybody. Hi, Susan. Working from England. Great. Great to see people from all over the globe. All right. Someone from the UAE. Hello. Hi, Linda. All right, this is so cool. So as you're all coming in, I know that we tend to get an influx of people at a couple minutes into the top of the hour. So come on in, introduce yourself in chat, take a look at the presentation right now, and it shows you where you can set your chat to send your message to all panelists and attendees. That would be a real good thing to do if you'd like to send your message to everyone. If you'd like to keep your message a little bit more private, you have other options there. You can send it to all panelists instead. So welcome, go ahead and introduce yourself into the chat channel. And I think we're gonna go ahead and get things rolling now. We wanna make sure that you get a good introduction to the program and to the courses that we're offering through the Allen Academy. And we also wanna make sure that you all get chances to ask any questions that come up along the way. So with that, we'll do some introductions. Go ahead and keep the chat going. We got a few people monitoring it, and I'll be looking for questions as they come in through the chat channel throughout the hour. For now, though, we're going to jump to introductions. Just to make sure everyone knows where you are, this is the Allen Academy Design Program Preview Hour. So we're going to spend the next 30 to 40 minutes looking through what the Allen Academy offers in terms of our design programs, as well as some exciting new options that we have launching today, actually, and going through a couple example exercises that have been taken directly from the courses and the programs. We want to give you a taste test of what it's like to experience the program so you can think about whether it's a good fit for you. We're going to be led today by Ethan Edwards. I'm going to jump ahead a little bit. Ethan is an instructional strategist for Allen Interactions and has been for many years. He's an experienced trainer. He's been teaching instructional design classes to instructional designers and others for quite a while. And I'll let Ethan talk a little bit more about that when I pass it along to him. My name is Ellen Burns-Johnson. I'll be monitoring your back channel. Once more, if you have questions during the session, please enter them into the chat channel. Make sure that your chat is set to all panelists and attendees. Jumping forward one more time, Ethan is going to be our main presenter today. I'll be back channel, and we'll also be joined for a little bit by Dr. Michael Allen. So Dr. Michael Allen founded Allen Interactions and has been instrumental in getting our vision for the Allen Academy off the ground. Michael, why don't you go ahead and say hi and tell us a little bit about why we started the Allen Academy.
Hi.
Hi.
I did my job, right? Said hi.
You did it.
Oh, I'm delighted to be here, and I have to tell you that in my career, which is not over yet, I hope, still going strong. One of the things that I have enjoyed the most is watching enthusiastic people create learning activities and events that are really helpful for others, you know. So we want to reach as many people in the world as we can with high quality learning experiences that help them realize their potential, their own goals. And it's really, really rewarding to help people learn how to create those activities. So today I see we have outreach to Argentina, which is really cool, to Iran, which is fantastic, and even a few states over down to St. Louis, Missouri, where my brother lives. So we're all over the world, and I'm just delighted to think that we might be able to help everyone who's interested create better learning experiences that could just be invaluable to people in their lives, especially at this time when many people are having to reconsider the direction that they're going and what they're going to do next. The Academy has been a dream of mine for a long time. In fact, some of you will know when we started our company way back in 93, that was just after we had created Macromedia, and which is now Adobe, as many of you know. We were excited that we had created tools that allowed people to develop really effective, engaging, fun learning experiences, and we thought, boy, we had really made a contribution, and I think we did to some extent. But then we watched what people were doing with those tools, and we're very disappointed that we can do so much more with digital learning than people are generally doing. And so we set out at Allen Interactions to set the example, to do the very, very best we could for each one of our clients to develop great learning experiences. At the same time, we offer training programs to help other people do that. We think right now there is the biggest need there's ever been for training on how to create imaginative, engaging learning experiences. And so this is the next stream, the Allen Academy, and we are so lucky to have great instructors, experienced people who are anxious to share what they've learned, and of course they continue to learn, advance their skills, and share them. The tools that are out there are are often not really focused on creating the kinds of learning experiences that we feel the digital technology ought to be delivering, but they can. It's just you really know how to do that. So at the Academy, one of the things that's really important for us is not only do we share procedures that really work for us, we think they'll work for you too, but we want you to know what we do, how we do it. Uh, but also, how do you translate those ideas using that process, uh, using the tools that you have available to you to create those learning experiences? In other words, we're trying to remove all of the roadblocks so that your creativity, your inspiration can reach students through the digital media. So that's really what the program is about. We want to apply learning principles that we think are really important in providing this experience. So we believe in mentoring, we believe in spaced practice, we believe in examples and counterexamples to help guide and so on. So I think what the Academy offers is a richer experience than you can find anywhere else. At least that's our goal, is to make this by far the best and make sure that the credentials that the Academy offers are really meaningful in our industry. So I think you're really lucky to hear from Ethan Edwards. I've often said he is the greatest instructional designer in the world, and I continue to believe that. And he is so generous with his thoughts and his time. And today, you get to hear from him and evaluate for yourself. So Ethan, I kind of put you on the spot, but
that's right, a lot to live up to, but thank you.
but I have faith. I know what you do, and it's terrific. So welcome everybody. I hope you find this to be an extraordinarily valuable 60 minutes of your time.
Okay, well, thank you for that intro and that really good encapsulation of what we're trying to accomplish with the Academy. And I love that this opportunity we have to just give you a little bit of a snapshot of what the experience is like. We're very proud of what we have been able to accomplish and the kind of growth that we've seen in our students that have taken it so far. So just what our main program that we've been doing, that it actually is a significant investment of time and a really great potential for gain of performance, is what we call our Allen Certified Instructional Professional. We call it a level 1 credential, in that it sort of is the foundation for all work that you'll do after that. And it has 5 components. We have, we've been working to create badges, and there you see the badge that you will earn by taking this as evidence that you can share to show what you've done. But we have 5 components. If you've heard about this before, there's a little bit of an adjustment. We're taking note of our experiences and realize that there's a little bit of a component that we wanted to add, which is really setting the groundwork for why you should do e-learning in particular, and what is completely necessary. Boring is bad is actually a title that Michael was pondering for his wonderful book, the Michael Allen's Guide to E-Learning. And it's such a fundamental statement that I think the publisher thought, well, that won't be a draw, but it's so fundamental, and yet it is ignored. And so we really are using that as a focus, because if you don't buy that, there's no point in moving forward and really getting a great understanding of why e-learning and any learning has to be engaging, and in what ways it can make a difference, and in particular, what leads to success. There's some fundamental choices that you make in designing, and we really, I think for many people, this is immensely eye-opening. It really resets the whole plane for how you're going to view the potential of e-learning moving forward. So there's just a 2-session program that sort of is a welcome aboard, and really creating the core beliefs and sort of your credo, what you believe in about e-learning, and it's really important to do that. And so that's a really great opening. And then we have a course that's specifically about interactivity. Often people start with instructional design, and we will get there, but we have figured out and that there's a model that we've used that is even more fundamental to understand and use, and it's about instructional interactivity. And so the next session is really understanding what that means. How do you engage someone to have active brain thinking and engagement that is necessary to create lasting change? That's followed up by a course that really is a software course. We use either Storyline or Captivate right now. Those are sort of the two leading development tools. And what we have found, as Michael said, these tools are very powerful, and yet the way they're taught and presented and the way that many people interact with them, they don't really connect with what you need to do to design the kind of interactivity that we'll have discovered and explored in the second course. And so this is a way to help people who already know the fundamentals to figure out some of those tricks and advanced activities that make it possible for you to build those. Because the one thing is most frustrating is I have students who are champions of understanding interactivity and then say, but I don't know how to build that. And when in truth, the building is not the challenge. It's just looking at these tools a little bit differently and understanding how you can break the walls that are sort of artificially placed in us and how we learn them. And you can do much more. And so that course is a really hands-on building using the tool of your choice to figure out how to build these interactions. The fourth course is then we really tackle what we know about instructional design, how different types of content needs to be presented, selecting examples, the importance of practice, and how you build that all in, how you build higher level problem solving skills and how you deal with that. And so that really is our focus there in the fourth course. And then what really is unique, I think, about our program is that it's capped off with a practicum where each learner gets to work on their own content. So it's not artificial, it's something that's directly applied to your position. And we have individual coaching. And the goal is that at the end of that capstone, you will have a fully functioning, really fantastically powerful piece of e-learning that then you can take and build upon as you move forward. So that's a preview of what the overall picture is. What we want to do today is just give you a couple snapshots into what some of those experiences are like. First, I mentioned boring is bad. This is the new foundation course that we are adding. And basically, while these things seem very fundamental, people act like they don't know it. And some non-controversial statements that lead us to that content that we'll really explore is, learners remember what they do. And an awful lot of people approach instructional design, and particularly e-learning design, focus on what I'm going to tell, what the instructor will tell. And that's not really where the learning occurs. And so a big switch into thinking, how do we put the learner at the center of our projects and how we're trying to do? Going along with that is that telling isn't teaching. So often people spend their whole design life crafting documents, word processing, editing. While all of that is important, that really isn't where the teaching occurs. And it's in how to get people driven and in control of their own learning. And then realizing also that adult learners have different needs. And what that leads us to is we have to figure out how to adapt and how to create opportunities for individualization. And again, another very frequent trap is creating e-learning that is inflexible, that everyone does. And you even get people saying, isn't that a great benefit of e-learning that everybody has exactly the same experience? Well, only if you're having to check off a box that says, I taught people. It rarely results in learning, because It needs to be flexible. Some learners need more practice, some need less. So anyway, if we grapple with these fundamental statements, it makes us approach creating e-learning in an entirely different way that's learner-centered, that is really trying to focus on how do you create meaningful and memorable and motivating experiences that will completely engage the learner. And so we really explore that. We look at a lot of examples and try to get a handle on what creates that possibility for success. And then after that, then we can really dive into the meat of designing interactivity, which is our Design 101 course, which I want to share a little snippet of a key idea there today, just so you get a sense of how we talk about things. And as I said, instructional designers spend an awful lot of time writing and perfecting content, but it's interactivity that's the critical element in e-learning. So I know that it may be new for people to think about interactivity as anything that you can control, because isn't interactivity just pressing buttons and whatever it is interactivity? Well, all interactivity is not equal. And I just want to share with you a little example to show how differently interactivity can work. So first off, I need to flip over to of course, my system is now, there we go. This is a little interaction, and the base interaction, I think, is what you would expect from a very typical sort of e-learning. And so this was drawn from some content about how a supervisor might deal with security issues in the workplace. They have to monitor it and take action if there are events that threaten the safety of other employees. So here the question is, you have a responsibility to promptly address employees' behavior that poses a threat to others. Which of these statements represents the most immediate threat to workplace safety? A, expression of frustration with ordinary office environment. B, criticism of team members. C, threatened act of violence. D, expression of personal emotional distress. Or E, expression of irritation with friends or family. Well, I'm going to say I think it's E. And it says, no, that's not right. There's a higher ranking concern. And so I can keep working here. I'm just going to guess here. Here, threatened act of violence. Oh, well, that means my system is clogged up here. But you got an idea. It's a very straightforward multiple choice question. Now, just real quickly in chat, if you could say, what's good and bad about that interaction? Just real briefly, weigh in on if you think how that interaction works and what's good and bad about it. So it requires a response, that's true. It makes you think, but it's sort of vague. It's frustrating if you guess wrong. Yeah, these are all great things. It should make you think about the options, but it's boring. There's only text. It's easy to build. So those are all advantages of it. Oh, and then very good comment there, Brian. It uses, it lacks sufficient context. It scrolled out of the way. Yeah, so that's one of the major things that's wrong here. It's just existing in the ether. It doesn't tie anything to a workplace. It's just how whatever meaning you can grab out of these words. And unfortunately, what we've learned that people read actually pretty poorly online. They only read partial statements. And with many of these questions, you'll find that people are just guessing, maybe saying, well, this is the longest answer, so it looks like it might be the most appropriate. So that's not the job of a designer, to create something that is this lackluster. We could create more meaning. And so we have a principle that, I've been working in instructional design for more than 30 years now. It's hard to believe that. But probably the most significantly impactful idea of all of that is this idea we call instructional interactivity. And it's something that Michael introduced in his book Michael Allen's Guide to E-Learning, and it's something that really drives all our design, and it is astoundingly effective. And what it says is a good interaction has to have context. That means it has to provide links to the real world. It can't live in the abstract. Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I was I, got ahead of myself here. So what do we mean by context? We mean have clues that help the learner realize how this has meaning. This is exactly the same question we had a moment ago. These are the 5 choices, but all that has been added is it has been placed in context so that you see that there are people interacting. It's in your work environment, and just that imagery and that placement in context suddenly gives us a whole bunch of significance, that suddenly I realize, oh, I work in that environment. I talk to people. These are I can see that these things arise. And even that tiny bit elevates this over the first example. So context provides a framework, provides a reason for even talking about this. Now, after context, we need to add a challenge. And I think some people mentioned in the chat that the first example was sort of boring. It didn't draw you in. And that's mainly because there was no challenge. There was no consequence, whether you did it right or wrong. There was nothing that you had to actually invest in this piece. You didn't have to draw on any particular skills or motivations to make progress. And if a learner invests nothing in a activity, they're going to reap nothing from it, because you aren't activated to process knowledge and link it to already things that you know. And so by challenge, we mean creating, requiring attention, motivation. Make there be an intention in your actions. There has to be some sort of risk. And different interactions may involve those factors differently. How that might apply here in even a very gentle way is that instead of just listing academic content, we could change this so these statements are representative quotes. So my boyfriend was so late getting the movie, I wanted to kill him. Well, in order for me to judge that, I have to do the work to translate that to the content I know, what kind of a statement is that? Is that threatening employees? Is it threatening anybody in the immediate area? Because you learn the rules in the abstract, but you perform in the details. And so there could be more challenges, and we'll see some in a moment as this fills out, but even just making the learner have to pay more attention creates risk, creates consequence, creates a need for motivation. And if I invest something as a learner in an activity, then I'm going to stick with it and get something out of it. So challenge is really, really important for a sense of intention and commitment. After challenge, then the learner needs to do something to respond to that challenge. And so that's what we call the activity or the action that the learner takes. And it's the gestures. Do you click on something? Do you move something? Do you type letters? And this is probably where your creativity is most taxed, I would have to say, because we are, in most e-learning, we're limited by a very, very small vocabulary of gestures that learners can do. They can click on something, they can point to something, or they can type letters. And almost nothing that you're going to teach involves the learner in the real world pointing to something, clicking on something, or typing letters. And so we have a native conflict that we're making people do things that are irrelevant. And so what we need to do is figure out how can we make those activities feel real, feel like they're not just an academic exercise of hit this button, but do something. Now, in this example we have, it's just a subtle change, but instead of having to just have the information provided for you, this is set up now, and just in the interest of time, and I'm having a little technical difficulty, I'm not going to show it, but and you'll see it later, have the learner roll over someone. So I'm actually having to do something. I have to have intentional activity. And when I roll over it, then I see what that person says. and then I could move the person to the office, which all are still pointing and dragging, but they represent things that I would do in real life. I would talk to people. I would be attentive to what they're saying, and I would call someone to have a conference if I perceived that there was a difficulty. So even though we're still linked into those sort of meaningless gestures, they become meaningful in this context and challenge world because of the way that we use the media, the way that we build context and challenge to provide intention. And then finally, you want to reflect back to the learner through feedback how they're doing. And too often in poor interactivity, all you get is judgment. You get it to say, no, that's wrong, try again. Well, that's not very helpful. If I don't know what's going on, that's more disheartening than anything. And so feedback really ought to give you information about how it could be improved, or what the severity or the significance of getting this wrong is, that would motivate you more to go back and figure it out. And so in our example, we added what we call intrinsic feedback, that if you make the wrong choice, it isn't just that you get a message saying, no, that's not right. Real things happen. You could have a terrible explosion with the guy that's gonna burn up the place because you were not attentive enough. And so combining feedback into the context through intrinsic measures, but also making sure that it provides useful information to correct yourself, are really parts of that as well. And so we have our context, challenge, activity, and feedback as just the fundamental idea to design e-learning that works. And that's, if I had to summarize the Design 102 course, it really is figuring out what that means, giving you plenty of opportunities to witness the vast ways of achieving that, and then several design chances to work in teams with your classmates to develop these ideas. And again, I think people find that it's really sort of life-changing in a way. Not to overstate it, but I actually have had people come up to me after a class and say, this has changed my life. Because to have the feeling that now you have an approach that is almost guaranteed to create change is a remarkable thing. And so I really hope that you'll take advantage of these opportunities and experience that yourself. Michael, were you wanting to add something there? I saw your gesture.
No, I was just agreeing, and there, like your experience, I've had people come up after I've shared this with tears, I mean, really crying, saying, I feel like I've been doing instructional design wrong my whole career. And just this insight gives me a new path to go on. So we know it's really powerful. And I hope that by sharing it, we're going to help a lot of people do what they've really been wanting to do, but have felt frustrated, like those people who will talk to us and say, I'd love to do the kinds of work that your studios do, but I'm just not that creative. Well, this process makes you creative in a way. Yeah. Really helps.
It really does. Yeah. So, we live this, and I know it might sound like anybody would say this, but it really has been the mission of Allen Interactions to partner with people who are hoping to build something great. And this is part of that mission, to share what we know. And the best thing that can happen is that everybody in the world can figure out how to make better e-learning. So now, Ellen, before I move on, if you were monitoring chat, were there any questions or anything that would be good to respond to right before we move forward?
Yeah, absolutely. I have a couple right now. So one just came in from Matt, and Matt asks if you could touch on how this model relates to an entire course versus an individual interaction. So do you see a whole course as a series of CCAFs?
Yeah, it applies to the whole experience that you're creating for the learner. And it depends on the scope of what you're trying to teach. Of course, the goal these days, it's better off to have modular components that people aren't focused in a course without break for an hour or two. And so indeed, each piece is its own CCAF, but most of the times we create an arc that combine these interactions into its own context that makes sense. You know, we might have a day in the life sort of activity where instead of having just independent actions, we have related challenges that might go with how you operate at a help desk, for instance. And there's a lot of different challenges, and that might be under this greater challenge of that you have to not steer any of your potential clients in the wrong direction. And so the context is that you're working in your space. You have things coming in through email, coming in through the phone, people coming up to your desk, each with a different sort of context for their problem. And so that's important. But then you have this overriding context of I'm doing my job as a help desk person and needing to maintain that. And the feedback is sort of how you are using customer service skills and applying your knowledge and applying policies appropriately. And all of it sort of combined together. So in a perfect situation, you have a CCAF operating at multiple levels.
Ethan, if you don't mind me jumping in.
Yeah.
That's certainly right. Matt, that's a good question, a really good question. And one of the ways to think about it also is that there's much said today about the power of storytelling to make the content you're delivering couched in a story. And CCAF really does that in that you set a context, you have the challenge, and the feedback can be, now your situation has changed. So you start with a base context. As learners make their decisions and do things, now the context has changed a little bit, or the context is still the same, but now you just face the next challenge in a sequence. And so the CCAF really gives you a framework that moves forward through the whole course. And it doesn't have to be a disjointed piece after piece, but actually it's much more real world like, because what you do maybe makes your situation worse now. You can learn a lot by trying to correct what you've done and move it forward. So it lends itself very nicely to a story-based sequence of interactions that can make up the whole course.
Yeah, well, I didn't point it out, but the picture is a circle. And so the feedback feeds right in the context. And one of the really hardest things to get people to grasp is that these aren't independent factors. They're highly integrated. And so indeed the feedback is made possible because you have created a great context. And the feedback then allows additional context. In fact, I always think that the image I have in my mind of this is not a flat circle, but you have those spiral potato peelers that create this thing. And so as you're pulling it up, each CCAF is leading into the next spiral. And at any instant, it's leading you forward. The action leads you forward to the next part of the story that you're going to get through the feedback. The challenge leads you to take action because it's so compelling. And so you actually are making progress continuously through these chained together. So any other questions, Ellen, or should we move on?
We have a few more, but let's hold them till later on because I know
Okay.
You have some other fun things to go over.
Yeah, I just wanted to give you a little preview of the sort of things we talk about in the tool part in Design 103. And I'm going to be showing a couple things in Storyline here. And these will be most useful if you have a little bit of insight into how Storyline works, but I think it'll be helpful even if not. And what I was going to do is show a couple things that get in the way of doing CCAF that are impediments. They're not that hard to solve, but I think they're eye-opening if you haven't discovered these. The first is I have this interaction that we were looking at built, if it will open. my machine was getting so sluggish today. Here we go. And if we preview this, this is that interaction, and I'm going to do a little preview of this slide. I hope it doesn't take forever. But it points out one of the built-in features of Storyline that is so helpful and easy, but it gets in the way of the context, in that when you build an interaction using the really very, very helpful free-form object editor, it provides certain things for you. Primarily, it creates generic feedback messages so that here we have our question. Soon. And when I click a wrong answer, like my boyfriend was so late getting the movie, I wanted to kill him, that's not the most pressing concern. I get this. And I went to all the trouble of creating that context, and suddenly, bam, I'm back into e-learning world with a message that has no relationship to that context. And it makes you feel like, well, we're back into questions. And part of the goal of this is to insert somebody into an immersive experience. But if we look at our code, when we created our freeform object, it creates our feedback layers. So here's what you get when you're correct. Here's what you get when you try again. And here's what you get when you're incorrect. And unfortunately, I can't edit these. And so it's easy to feel stuck. The little trick, though, is you can create your own feedback messages, but what you have to do is delete the default one. So I'm going to come here and say, we're going to get rid of correct. And I'm going to get rid of the try again feedback. And I'm going to get rid of the incorrect feedback. And now all I have to do, though, is recreate them. And the only trick is to make sure you call them exactly what you want. And here's correct. And I'm going to create another one, which will be called try again. And one more that we'll call incorrect. And now we can make whatever kind of feedback we want. I know it's sort of silly because we deleted and we created, but this is the way you do that. And so I'm going to create my own custom feedback by, in the correct layer, I'm going to insert a picture here from our media library. And we have a little picture of a coach. So I'm going to insert that image. And I'll bring him down here. And I'll give him a little speech bubble. Then I'll say this is the correct feedback. I'll say that's correct. And employee who threatens other employees is the highest priority and must be dealt with first. Okay, so now if I go and look at our form view to see what this looks like, it still has our feedback areas, but now it says custom slide layer rather than having this, the default message that you might type within that. People have asked, well, why don't you just go and edit the master for the feedback? Well, the thing is, different interactions are going to require a different sort of context-rich feedback. And so you can only have that one type for the overall lesson. And so this allows you to customize feedback very precisely to match the context that you have, okay? So a simple thing, but impossible if you don't know that. These are tricks that our own developers have figured out, and they say they're tricks is inaccurate. It's just ways of using the features at hand that really make a huge difference in creating e-learning. Now I'm not going to correct the other ones because you can imagine how to do that, but just in the interest of time, I'm going to move to another idea here that is just incredibly powerful, and it's probably something you're not unaware of, but it makes such a difference. Almost every interaction that we build is relying on a real fundamental use of states. Because one of the things you notice here, we have a person who is talking, and we have her speech bubble, and it's a little, if I click on the girl, it doesn't work because the trigger is actually clicking on the speech bubble. And as I showed in the activity, it might be better if we could have these as rollovers, that the speech bubble doesn't show up until I've sort of picked the girl. Now, you may have experimented with this by just starting the file by hiding this speech bubble and have a trigger when I roll over the body of the woman, then it reveals it. And that works. It's just a big headache to keep track of all those pieces and knowing when you're erasing, when you're reshowing, all that stuff. And so what we're going to do instead is I'm going to cut this speech bubble. Because we don't want to have it on our main display. And instead, I'm going to go to the woman that it's attached to, the blonde figure in our diagram. And there's a section which we call states that hold on, I'm trying to get my Zoom panel out of the way. And you notice that when we look at a person with a state, here's our girl, but we can edit those states. And so that one object can have many different ways of being displayed. People become familiar with this using the states of buttons, when you're pressing the button and selected, but using it as instructional elements is just immensely powerful. So I'm going to add a state to her, and I'm going to call this hover. Actually, this is a built-in possible state, so I can actually pick it from a pop-up. That we're going to do a hover state. We're going to add it, and I'm going to add to the woman in this hover state by pasting that speech bubble. So now when I'm looking at it in the normal state, it's just the woman. When I hover over it, it's going to come to show her speech. And then I'm also going to create one more, and I'm going to do this when it's selected so that if you actually click on it, you'll see a difference, and we will add that speech bubble here. But it's really so powerful that you can do any kind of editing on what you create in a state just the way you would do on the main screen. So I'm going to go and pick that. With that speech bubble picked, I'm going to go ahead and fill it yellow so that it'll be clear that we've picked that one out. And so now we have our states, and all I need to do when I'm done is I no longer have a separation between the speech bubble and the woman, so I can click on any part of it to select it. I do need to go into our form view and notice that the speech bubbles were the pieces in our multiple choice. And if I need to go back and add now to modify that so that that woman, which includes her speech bubble, is, let's see, that's the woman boyfriend, is one of our choices, and it's going to be incorrect. And now when I run this fellow, we're coming. Thank you for your patience. Haven't figured yet how to speed up this preview process. But you know, one of the things that we try to do and as we'd be doing this in the actual course is everybody's working together. And so it's important to, you know, just watching somebody doing something is of minimal use, but having a coach to actually work through everybody's getting it and seeing it happen in real time makes all the difference in the world. So here you can see now I can roll over our figure, and I could choose her. Oh, I didn't fix the trigger also, but you can see how now I have one element in the file when I had multiples before. And if you've ever tried to build things, one of the biggest frustrations is just keeping track of all the things. So any way to reduce the number of objects and compress them and use them more powerfully is a great way to enable you to have more responsive and more context-driven e-learning. Okay. Ellen, I think maybe we should go to questions now. I had,
Yeah, absolutely. So we're at about 10 minutes left, and I know people will be dropping off soon to probably go to their next thing. So let's answer some of the questions that trickled in on the back channel. So one of the things we've had a couple questions about is the structure of the course versus the structure of the program. So we went through some samples of 2 different courses. How does it, what's the format for those individual courses, and how do they string together to make a full 4-course program?
Yeah, well, the Design 101, well, all of them, well, 100, 100, and 103 have a similar pattern in that we meet for 2 hours online for 6 sessions. The Design 101 is 2 sessions, but the other ones are 6, usually 2 days a week. And we have, it's a lecture, demo, discussion, activity format. We try to mix up things. We look at a lot of examples. We have breakout groups to design together. We really try to make them as interactive as possible, but they really are exploring those ideas of design, looking at real life examples to get a broad range of it, and then having plenty of time to apply it. The Design 103 course that I just was showing you an aspect of is a little different in that we are all in storyline simultaneously working together. And we have, actually, there's some of the same some of the examples we had studied in 102, we learned how you would build those. Because you know, one of the problems is in learning to use a new tool is, how do you know what to build because you don't have the idea yet, and you don't have the idea because you don't quite know how to build it. And so it really helps to have a target. And so we have some really interesting, that at first seem very complicated interactions, and we work through them and realize, hey, it isn't that hard to do. And so that's the general structure. We have assignments between each session. We review those at the beginning of this next session. And yeah, so we try to have as close and interactive of discussions as we can as we work across the internet.
Okay, great. So I think we had a couple people who may have dropped off, but one of the questions that came up a little bit is kind of more of the strategic side of things. We had a couple people ask about whether there is material in this program or in one of the courses that's more about kind of mapping the overall curriculum, or taking a program that is currently VILT and moving it to include a variety of different modalities. Can you speak to that a little bit, Ethan?
Yeah, well, this is just, the Academy has 4 colleges. This really is the specific instructional design college and the level 1 program for that. But we are offering and getting on their feet a number of other programs in sort of the management area of how you plan for learning, and both courses and electives. We don't have the one scheduled yet, but we have a course planned that is really about that issue you're talking about, is what is your overall strategy for creating a training program using all the tools that you have at your disposal, how to make that work. We do have another elective that's not part of the program that's coming up very soon. It's about mobile learning that Clark Quinn will be teaching, but that sort of is a little bit more strategic too, as like thinking about this as a new delivery system, and what does that mean for incorporating it into your overall training program. I don't know, Alan, if you want to add more to that.
Yeah, I think that absolutely makes sense. And I think that one of the ways that I'm thinking of the program, the design program specifically, is it really creates some great fundamentals for you. And then there are options to branch out into other ways as well. But something we haven't mentioned throughout the webinar yet is that we do offer people the opportunity to register for a single course at a time. We've been kind of referring to a program throughout the webinar, but that program is structured with 4 different courses, and it's absolutely possible to register for a single course at a time. If you'd like to just take one, get your fundamentals down, and then go on and apply those fundamentals in the way that you'd like in your particular role, that's fantastic. So we're looking to create something similar for different areas of our curriculum, including learning game design and learning leadership, and also impact measurement. So stay tuned. I think a couple of people asked about cost. So during the last couple of minutes, we can touch on that really quickly. We have our cost per program as well as per course. So the cost per course is $14.95 unless you're registering for the entire program at once, in which case you get $200 off per course to make it $12.95. And then the mobile learning strategy and design course is a little less than that. That's about $8.95. So the pricing and registration information is all on the allenacademy.com. You can find all the course information, instructor information, registration, and pricing on our website. Michael just mentioned in the panelist chat that those prices include mentorship. So maybe that'd be a good thing to end on. Ethan, can you go into a little bit more detail about what one course gets you in terms of the learning experience, the individual practice, and the mentorship time?
Yeah, the Design 104 is the capstone project, which is sort of independent work with expert coaching and mentoring from the instructors you've had throughout the previous season, the previous courses. And so it really is sort of an opportunity to develop your own ideas with somebody to guide you along the way. One of the worst most difficult things about creating something new is you don't know what to do when you're working alone, and you really need some expert advice, not to do the work for you, but to point you in the right directions. And it's if you're familiar with Project Runway, it's a little bit like the mentoring there. The people are working on a project, and Tim Gunn goes around and can look at it from an experience point of view, offer tips, either from the technical point of view of how are you building this, or from the design point of view, have you considered this element? But it's really letting you work in a coaching environment to solve one of your own problems. And so we've had really great success so far with people taking topics that they're challenged with, and then there's temptations to cut corners or to not make the best CCAF. And we have individual Zoom consultations and share stuff and get ideas. And you have to create something to get your badge. Is really have to come up with something that satisfies most of our criteria for what a good context challenge activity and feedback is, that matches the instructional outcome, that provides the right sort of practice, the right sort of presentation, and is built in a fundamentally sound way in an authoring tool. And so it's all the pieces that have to come together, and it's just a really unique opportunity to have that coaching, and then also to be sharing it with your cohorts that are in your course. We have initial, intermediate, and final project presentations, and so getting ideas from other students and other people in your same boat, not only a mentor, is really valuable for increasing your ideas.
Thanks, Ethan. I think that was a great answer. So kind of along the same vein as the instructional experience, but one of the things that Allen Interactions has done a lot over the years is taught those 2 to 3 day certificate classes you can often take at the beginning of a conference before you go have fun. You get the real work done first. So I would like to, maybe as a couple more minutes while people are hanging on here at the end of the hour, could you talk a little bit about the advantages over the more kind of distributed format that the ACIP program and the individual courses take? Because the courses that we teach take place over several weeks, and the experience is longer, kind of divided into smaller chunks. What are the advantages of doing something like that over time?
Well, I know a lot of people by default think, well, wouldn't it be better if I were in person at the conference? And there's benefit of face-to-face contact, no doubt. But I think we're all getting really good at Zoom too. So I'm feeling that those barriers are not there so much. But I think the thing that it allows is one of the most fundamental principles that we know in psychology is what's called the spacing effect. That one of the worst ways of trying to teach is try to teach too much in too short of a time. And in a face-to-face course, we're forced to really spend an awful lot of time just ramming through all that information in 1 day or two. When we have it spread out, we can have assignments that actually have, it can't be completed in 5 minutes because you can have time between sessions. People can really have the time to think about it, to develop more complete responses. Because you have your hands tied in a live seminar about, well, if we spend the half hour on this what we ought to, that's going to be a half hour of content that people are wanting to get by being here. And so that separation allows much better assignments, allows much better questioning. I found that when we regroup, there's always wonderful questions that people have thought about, and we are able to respond to those. And those things happen after you're back home in those pre-conference trainings when it's too late to do anything about it. And so that, just having more time and more flexibility, I believe, has greatly increased the value of the courses, the actual learning events.
Okay, well, thanks for the thorough, Ethan. We're at the top of the hour. We have several people still hanging up. We'll stay on 4 minutes. If you have questions, go ahead and type them into the chat, and we'll hang on a little bit to answer your questions as they come up. If you have questions that pop up later in the day, or if you'd like to take a little bit more of a detailed look at the programs, what they offer, and the different elective courses that we have for the Allen Academy, go ahead and head to allenacademy.com, and you'll be able to see our entire course catalog, as well as some additional resources and our bookstore. So go ahead and check that out. We're also happy to answer any individual questions if you'd like to email us at provost.
Achieve the and so I'm never going to become significant. And I think we'd want to have more of a
course. So the question to get you started with the interaction.
We started that 103 class more than some others were relation, but she did okay. Of course, I think if you do have, as long as you know what the pieces are, you'll probably get along okay. Of course, the more you know, the more you'll be able to apply it questions. But I would say the bar is quite low, that as we've taught it, that people with very slim experience get a lot out of it.
Okay, a couple people asked about the recording link. Just a reminder, we will be sending recordings out.